Hey y'all, I'm James Wright, and welcome to my dining room once more. You've seen me build the table, you've seen me build the floor, you've seen me build the trim, but finally, we're getting around to the chairs for the dining room. Oh boy, this is gonna be fun. So, I built my table a little over 2.5 years ago, and now it is finally time to build the chairs. And because it's a big table, we need lots of chairs. So we're going to be building 10 white oak chairs. Now these are the kits from Matt Cremona, and he makes these, they're basically ready to assemble. You just need to do a lot of little detail and clean up on them to get them ready. So today we're going to be starting working on this, and this is going to be a lot of work. 1 chair, lots of fun. 10 chairs, yeah, help. Some of you may think I'm taking the easy way out making the kits, but I'm probably going to end up spending about 40 hours plus just making these kits. If I were to create them from scratch, I'd probably be looking at somewhere around 400 hours, which is almost as much. Actually, it's probably more than I spent on the table. So, yeah, I'm going with kits, and these from Matt Cremona are absolutely gorgeous. There's no way I can improve on them. They're exactly what I would want to make. So we're going to take these, and they come with all the pieces you need to make them except for the finish and the glue to apply them. We're going to be doing a fairly heavy chamfer on all of the main corners, and then on this seat we're going to round down the pockets. Most of that is done with spoke shaves, as they can round around corners very easily. Though there are a few straight boards where I can use a block plane, most of it's done with the spoke shave. And I really like using the rounded bottom spoke shave. It allows me to have a little more flexibility, but most of these curves are gentle enough I could still do it with the flat bottom. But the rounded bottom just feels good. This is the back, and it needs to actually fit into a groove into both of the stretchers at the top and bottom of the back. Unfortunately, the machine that cut out the mortise for it to fit into makes rounded holes. So either you have to square out the holes, or, because I'm putting chamfers on the back, I'm going to round the corners of the back that stick into it. And those rounds will just morph into chamfers. So I'm just rounding the very edge so that they can pop down into that slot. The slot on the top is actually much bigger, so I don't need to adjust that. And then, of course, we're going to chamfer all the corners on the back as well. And this brings it all the way down. Now you want to be very careful to go with the grain. Here I'm showing going against the grain. And you can, if you're taking a thin enough shaving, going against the grain for some of it. But you realize that eventually it starts to scratch and you have to turn around and go the other way. And so making sure you're following the grain on all of these is very, very important, because they are all over the place. There's different curves and bends, and so you'll be doing with the grain one direction and then against the grain the other direction. And so a lot of these you'll be doing half the piece pointing one way and the other half pointing the other way. And some of these have really small pieces, so getting that chamfer on there can be kind of difficult. Making sure you don't slice up your knuckles. And a lot of this you want to put in the vise, but then the vise gets in the way of chamfering. And so these actually take a good bit of work to chamfer down by hand and get them out nice and clean. The other thing we're going to have is a lot of these will have mill marks and other things that need to be taken off, and we're going to be doing our final smoothing with a card scraper. And so we're going to be keeping our eye on all of these points, and anything that has issues that need to clean out, we're going to come in with the card scraper and clean those out. As well as we'll come in and clean up all the chamfers right off the end with the card scraper as well. The chamfering and smoothing really took a lot of work. They took more time than I expected, but they were very worth it in the end. Getting that nice clean chamfer from a sharp tool just looks really good. It looks a lot cleaner than a rounded edge, and it just makes me very pleased. Also, on the ends of all 4 legs, we're going to put a big chamfer on those, so when they slide around they don't splinter off. That is a very important step. Even though I'm going to be putting felt bits on there, we want to make sure those are done. Here are some of those mill marks that need to be cleaned off, and here's some of the feet that need to be chamfered. And especially the inside legs go at a weird angle, and so chamfering those, you're putting angles on compound angles, and it just looks really weird. These are most definitely not spent finish ready. There is a lot of work to be done on it, and especially when you're making a series of 10, you've got to do a good bit of work chamfering everything down or rounding it down or whatever shape you want to put on them. But eventually you get all that done and we can do our first dry fit. We want to make sure everything squeezes together, and so I'm just doing up one of these full kits. And this ends up being far more of a puzzle than I expected. And this back, I was just raking my brain over it and realized, oh, I've got to flip the whole thing over. And I did that like 3 times throughout the build, at different times of assembly. There are just so many different compound angles everywhere on this, and every piece has its own little bit, and they all match perfectly. They were all cut exactly, and every joint is incredibly tight. I'm impressed with the build quality on this. But you need to spend some time and really go through how exactly do you assemble this. You start by putting together the back, and then you can put on the 4 stretchers that come off towards the front, and then put the 1 stretcher in between the 2 front slots, and then those can go on to the front. And every one of these, every joint has a bit of an angle one way or the other. There are no boards that are 90 degrees to each other. They are all askew. And yeah, here I'm putting it together, no glue, just sitting on it to see what it feels like. And I'm very, very happy with how they came out. They are incredibly comfortable, shaped to the rear end as well as the curvature in the back. It hits precisely where I want it to, and they're just, I'm blown away. And for those of you wanting to know, this is kit number 5 with the Quartersawn White Oak. What else would I go with? And they really match the feel of the table, and so I kind of like that. Now for the finishing, I am going to do a pre-finishing on it, so doing this all before we do the glue up. One of the big reasons for that is I'm going to be using epoxy. I know, epoxy in chair making. Yes, in this case, in this application, that is what I definitely prefer. And I'll talk about that here in a minute. For the actual protection, we're going to be taping up the tenons. On the first set, which is what I'm videoing here, where I'm going to be filling in all of the mortises. And the rest of them, I didn't actually fill in the mortises. I found it easier just to wipe around them because I'm going to be using Rubio Monocoat and put on with a rag. I'm not going to be spraying, and so I really don't need to tape all these. It's a big time saver not to. I still tape the tenons because I really want to make sure that those are nice and clean. For the actual finish, a lot of these pieces I'm going to hang from the ceiling. So in order to do that, I'm creating these loops that are about 12 inches long on each leg, and these can then get spring squeeze clamped to the ceiling. And then I can put a spring squeeze clamp on the other end to hang up all the pieces by their tenon. And they actually work really, really well. So I made up about 20 or so of these so I can do them at any given time. You have the loop hanging from the ceiling, and then another clamp hanging the piece, and you can finish it, hang it up, and it's good to go. This actually worked really, really well. If you have open rafters, this is the way to do it. This is very, very pleasing. It's similar to what Matt was showing on his. For the finish, I'm going to be using Rubio Monocoat. The reason being is this stuff is my all-time favorite finish for furniture. It is incredible. It looks just like boiled linseed oil. It has a feel just like boiled linseed oil and paste wax. It is just gorgeous. It has that nice matte feel so you can still feel the wood, but yet it's incredibly protective. I've had it on my dining room table with 3 kids in the house, and it protects the table unbelievably well. If there's ever any problem with it or something that gets a heavy scratch, you can bring out a card scraper and scrape it down and then refinish over just that spot. It finishes beautifully. It's 1 coat, 15 minutes, and you're done. It is unbelievably easy. Any monkey can put this on. It's just apply it on so that it soaks into the wood. Especially with a ring porous wood like white oak, it takes a little bit longer for it to soak in all the way and get to depth. And so I put it on a little bit heavy, just wipe it down, and then I'm going to set it aside for about 15 minutes and let it soak up as much of it as it wants to. It's not going to soak really deeply. It doesn't go in very, very deeply into the wood. It just bonds with all of the exterior pores and seals them off. And I'm going to wipe it on, let it sit, and then 15 minutes later come back and wipe it off. And that's all there is to it. 1 coat and it's done. It is incredibly fun. When it comes time to wipe it off, just grab a rag and you're going to basically polish the wood. You're taking off any of the excess that's still sitting on the surface, and you're going to polish it down and smooth it. And this comes about 15 minutes after the initial application, and that's it. Let it sit for 24 hours and it cures up and you're good to go. That's all to it. And on top of this, it smells amazing. Most finishes just absolutely reek. This one actually smells really, really good. It smells almost like oranges. It is incredibly pleasing and a lot of fun, and there's a reason I love it. It is one of the more expensive finishes, but you get what you pay for. And when I do furniture, this is the one I want. It's gorgeous, especially with all of the rays on this. It acts like that boiled linseed oil, allowing them to pop, and it's beautiful. I just can't say enough good things about it. So we're going to get all of that on, and then it's going to be time for the glue up. But this step actually takes quite a bit because there are a lot of pieces. There are no duplicate pieces in a particular chair because they're all either mirrored left or right, or very different. And so there are a lot of pieces in every step along the process. Because I'm doing 10 chairs, that means 130 pieces. And with the 15 minutes in between, I can coat one set of about 5 or 6 pieces, and then I'll set those aside, and I'll coat the next set of 5 or 6 pieces. Then the first set, I'll come back and wipe those off, and then the second set, I'll come back and wipe those off. And so in series, it takes about an hour or so to do all the finishing on each individual chair. So that means about 10 hours of finishing work, going back and forth and hanging them up and letting them cure. And it makes the shop smell great, but it is a lot of work applying it and wiping it off, even with something like this. It is, it's fun, but it works out well, and I really like how it comes out with this. Now for the glue up, I'm going to be using epoxy, and the epoxy I'm going to be using because there are a bit of gaps in the joinery. It is machine made, and so they're not pressure tight the way I would normally make them, but they are they're good enough. They're rather tight without being overly tight. But for a PVA, you really need a compression for the PVA to work well. If I were to use hide glue would actually be really good for this. It has a good gap filling, but epoxy has a little bit better gap filling. So I got one set all done and ready to finish, and I go to glue them up and I mix up the epoxy and I get everything ready and I'm about to start gluing it, only to realize I finished 2 left legs. Yeah, my chairs aren't going to dance very well. The problem with a hide glue is that it doesn't have enough open time for doing an entire chair. I would have to do the chair in pieces. I wouldn't be able to glue the whole thing together in one full step. With a epoxy, I can glue the entire thing together in one simple step. Now the downside to epoxy is that it's not reversible. So if the joint breaks or has problems, it's going to be a little bit more of a fuss to work with, but in that case I can re-epoxy to epoxy. I don't need to worry about that. With hide glue, it's a little bit easier because you can take apart broken joints a little bit better, though it is still a ton of work. Epoxy just is not changeable. The nice thing about pre-finishing is anything that squeezes out doesn't really stick to the finish itself. With the epoxy, it'll stick a little bit, but with the epoxy, I can actually just come in and wipe it off while it's still wet, and it works perfectly. And with any other finish, with any other glue, you can wipe it off the surface before it cures and not have any staining or any appearance to it. For the actual clamp up on this, I don't need clamps to provide pressure for it to glue up. But I do want to make sure I close up all the joints, and I want to make sure that they're all good and tight. So I need to provide pressure in all the joints to hold them tight while it glues up. And with mortise and tenons, there really is no way to clamp the PVA. So we're going to have one strap running around the top, one strap running around the seat, and then another strap holding the legs front to back. This will make sure that everything gets pulled tight. Before it all sets, I want to put the seat on there and make sure that it is square. I want to make sure that if there's any tweaking that needs to happen, I'm going to do it right now. Uh-oh. And that means that it is now time for the possessed demoned yellow brace. Yes, I know some people are going to have problems with holding the top down with screws, but in all honesty, it is the best choice. If I need to do any changes on it, if I want to cover these in the future with fabric, it is really easy to just unscrew it and put it on. It puts a couple screws into either the stretchers, one through into the leg, and this block will actually add strength to the whole thing. And then a couple pocket hold screws. I know pocket holes, but really they are the best way to just hold the back to the back of the seat, to the back of the chair. They work really well in this situation. And there are 4 screws that go down through these brackets and then into the seat itself. Oh, these things are actually incredibly comfortable. I'm just really, really happy. Really, really happy. The curve hits the back just perfectly. Just the right size. Matt, you did really good work. I like this one. I am absolutely overjoyed with these seats. They are incredibly gorgeous. They are exactly what I want. They fit the style and the feel of the table, and they were a pleasure to make. And so, yes, these were a lot of fun, and I am incredibly happy with it. Unfortunately, now I've got to go and make 9 more of them. So I'll see you in a few years. Bye. So the astute among you will realize that there is one chair that has been completed. Yes, I still have probably about another week and a half to 2 weeks worth of finishing and finish smoothing of all of the other chairs. I still have a lot more work to do, but I wanted to get this video out. So if you want to see the table with all the chairs around it, you can follow me on Instagram or on Facebook. It'll be on the Hive Mind as well. I'll be putting up pictures of that once they're all done. But right now we've got one of them, and this chair kit really came out phenomenal. I was really, really happy with this. So thank you to Matt Cremona for making these kits. They are surprisingly affordable for what you get for a really solid hardwood chair that goes together very, very quickly, much, much faster than actually making them all. And there's a reason why I don't do many chairs on this channel. It's a topic that I really don't enjoy that much. But this made it a lot easier to just do the fun part of getting it done. So if you want to see more about Matt Cremona's chair kits, I'll leave a link to that down below. And I am looking forward to getting the other 9 of these built, because it's a big table and it needs lots of chairs. So stay tuned for that. So I'm sure there are lots of comments or ideas or thoughts or things that I should have done, or maybe I should have made the kits from the beginning, or maybe I should have done some other adaptations to this. I have thought about doing some carving in the top. There's lots of other things that I could do on these, but for right now, we're just going to leave them as is because they're what my wife wants, because she wants nice chairs for her nice table. So let me know your thoughts and all that down below. Also, I want to say a huge thank you to all of the patrons on Patreon. Everyone scrolling over there, they are the ones keeping the lights on and keeping this channel going. Without patrons on Patreon or members who have clicked the little join button, we wouldn't be here. So thank you. We are sponsored completely by you, the viewers. And if you like that, you can find out more about Patreon down in the description below, or click the little join button and become a member here. We do have special perks for both. I think that'll do it for now. And until next time, have a wonderful day. Finally, I can be the chair of the committee. I know, that was a pretty lame joke and I had to stretch it a good bit, but don't worry, we'll be back with more.